where you're like, yeah, this guy finished this thing in like 2 weeks.
Yep.
Right? And me, I won't even finish doing this thing on this thing.
My pie chart isn't working yet.
Yeah, but your pie chart isn't working while this guy's already finished this thing.
Yes.
Have a conversation with him and you're like, bro already has a PhD.
Yeah.
How can you like? Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Build, a podcast where we talk about everything about software engineering, beyond writing code.
Yep.
Yeah. Today we want to talk about imposter syndrome. I am here with my co-host, Okbe.
Yep.
And yeah, that is the topic for today, imposter syndrome. I think first we should probably define what imposter syndrome is. I'll have you go first.
So I define imposter syndrome as the feeling that you have when you are allowed to be in a space officially, but you don't feel like you are qualified enough to occupy that space. That's my definition.
What are some reasons why you may not feel like you're qualified to be in that space?
Oh, I could talk a bit about this.
Okay. Yeah.
So sometimes it's like you see what your colleagues look like and you don't feel like you belong. Or you see their profiles and you don't feel like you belong. I dealt with this when I moved to grad school, 2 years ago to grad school, like hard work experience. But then like when I looked at like some of those websites where like students that are about to go to school post things, especially people that are from overseas, I was seeing like, hey, all these people that are going to school with me, these boys have been first from primary school. If you look at their profile, first in nursery school, first in primary school, like they've been first all of their lives. And I'm like, what? I'm going to be going to school to compete with these people. Am I even good enough to go and occupy the same space as these people? Yeah, that's some of like how I think about imposter syndrome. How about you?
For me, imposter syndrome is just, when I think about it in the sense for me personally, it's like feeling like I haven't done enough to be where I am.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
That's how I think about it. It's more along the lines of, what have I done that makes me worthy of this space?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
How am I different from, the people who are currently here? What have they done? Like, and for some of it is like you're comparing yourself to people, right? Like you said, where you're like, all right, this guy has been first his whole life. And other parts of it is like, man, this guy is doing this thing really, really well, or he's doing this thing really, really fast. And it's taking you time. Or you look at your background and you're like, man, this guy has worked at, or rather, this guy is from this Ivy League school, right?
Yeah.
I think that's how I see it, and less on the part that you described. Yeah.
Oh, fair.
Yeah.
Something similar. When I interned at Zillow 2019. So I started at my internship with like, I think somebody started a week before me. And in the, literally I think on like after my first week, we were supposed to build something that essentially used deep learning to tag for whether like some text is something or the other, right? In the second week, like it was my second week. I started my second week. My director called a meeting with the interns. And then this guy that has been there only 1 week before me essentially says, hey, I have actually built the whole thing that the project was about in 2 weeks.
Oh.
How
you want to compete?
How do I even start? I hadn't even set up my computer completely.
Yeah.
And this guy it built everything. So that meeting, I had crazy imposter syndrome. I don't think I was obviously panicking, but inside of me, I was like, oh my God, I am not getting a return offer.
Yeah.
Cause what is this? How does somebody do this? And honestly, I dealt with that for the whole of my internship. I worked Monday to Sunday throughout the internship because I was like, how does somebody even do all these things? And I think it was much later towards the end of the internship that I started talking to him very well. And I was like, oh, he went to Stanford. In the lab that he works at in Stanford, they solved this specific problem. But also, he had a PhD from his home country. Then he came to do a master's in Stanford.
So you're competing with...
Nobody told me this at the start. And I did not use LinkedIn for some reason. I don't even know why.
Yeah.
But I was so intimidated. I was like, how do I even occupy the same space as this person? But in reality, we had different backgrounds, right? And that was just what it is.
That's interesting. I think for me, another part of, or another aspect of imposter syndrome is always feeling that I could have done this better, right? When I first joined my team straight out of college, I was one of the few software engineers on my team, and our role was just to automate things for people, right?
Yeah.
This network engineer comes, hey, I have this process that's taking 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and I have to be involved throughout the whole 15, 30 minutes, and the SLA is like 4 days. Can you help me automate it? Can you help me write a script? The answer is usually almost yes, because there's like an SDK you can use. Most of the challenges there was just standardization, because you can't automate without standardization, right? So I would build a thing, it would work, and it would be in production, and it would be running, and it would be fixing their use case, but I would still feel like it's not enough.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I was the only one doing it, and I felt like there was always a better way this thing could be done.
Yes.
Like, there was always a better way. Either the code could be written, there was always a better way the design could have been done, right? There was always something better that I didn't have. And part of it was because I didn't have mentorship. I didn't have guidance from a senior software engineer who had been there for a long time.
Fair.
It was just me by myself writing this thing. I would deploy it and nothing would happen, right?
Yeah.
The thing would work. There would be no issues. I would reach out to them, say, hey, how far? How's this thing going? They're like, oh yeah, it's great. I used it this morning. It solved my problem. I'd be like, oh, okay. But still, like, how else could I have done this thing that could have been better? And there's always that question that you should have in the back of your mind. But at the time, for me, it wasn't coming from, all right, I want to be a better engineer. It was from fear. It was like one day, something is going to happen. And it will be like, they've exposed you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It'll be like they've exposed you where you didn't do this thing that you were supposed to do. And it's like, how do you miss this thing?
Yes.
How are you a software engineer and you miss this thing? But in the back of my head, it was always there. And then that's why it wasn't like, okay, let me get better. It was like, one day I'm going to be exposed.
Yes.
For not knowing or for making a mistake that I shouldn't have made. Yes. And I didn't have guidance. Yeah.
And I think like it goes back to what you're saying, which is, in reality, when you feel like you are an imposter, well, maybe that is something telling you that you have some things you need to learn. And imposter syndrome shouldn't paralyze you. Like, deal with it, be stressed about it for a day or two or whatever, but like start to learn and start to be very aggressive about learning. That's the most important thing you can do in that space, to start to build your confidence. Start to say, hey, how do I take time outside of work to get better? If that's possible, but like find spaces where like look at other people's repos and then start to get like an idea of how to do things. Because if you don't learn and you just wallow in the fact that you don't belong and you don't try to like get better at it, you're not going to get out of it.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to, and like I think imposter syndrome isn't always a bad thing. It's a sign that you need to grow in something. So yeah, find out to grow in that thing.
Yeah, I was literally going to say that it's usually an indication of a gap somewhere.
Yes. Right?
It's like you're feeling this way for a reason, right? Think about that reason, right? Yes. Think about why you are feeling this way, right? What evidence do you have for feeling this way? Yeah. Is it that someone finished a project in 1 week that you're supposed to do your whole internship? Is it that a problem actually happened with your code, right? Yes. And it exposed you? Is it that you're seeing people who don't look like you in this space, right? Yeah. There's a gap somewhere, right? Depending on what the gap is, as you said, figure out a way to close that gap, and slowly and surely you stop feeling like an imposter. For me, in the situation where I felt like, oh, I'll be exposed, like, man, before they expose me, let me go and find someone who knows, who has written way more code than me, and have them review my code, have them review this system, and then kind of like tell me what could be better. So I started taking my designs to ARB, which is Architectural Review Board, where senior software engineer, senior software architect will roast your design. They'll be like, oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about this? And no, I hadn't. That is just the reality, because at that point in time, I was doing the best with the information that I had. Yeah. And that is completely fine, right? That's completely great. So that's how I kind of like bridge that gap of being exposed, where it's like, all right, before I get exposed in front of everybody, let me go and expose myself. Yeah. Right? Let me go and expose myself. Let me go and find people who will say, yo, change this thing, make this thing much, much better. Or think about it this way, right? There's a potential that this might happen. Think about it this way. There's potential that might happen. Think about it this way.
On that same note, I will caution about what Umar just said. Mm-hmm. You want to find people that care about helping you grow, but maybe don't report in the same line as you. Because sometimes as well, like if you show somebody something you're thinking that you know is rough, but the person is in your reporting line, like it's a workplace.
Yeah. It's so everybody's looking out for themselves.
Yeah. So you kind of, especially if you work in a non-startup or in a place that's bigger, like it's big enough where like people that you can get support from aren't always like from your manager, like somebody that's directly in your manager's like line. Kind of find like those people and like try to instead do that, because it allows you feel more like it's a safe space. Because somebody on a random team that you find from like pasting something you're trying to figure out in GitLab in your work environment might be able to give you support, or like just generally like whatever your job is, right? Find somebody that's not gonna go tell your manager, give you feedback that behind your back, right? So that same kind of safety, finding that safe space. If you have an ARB in your org, in your company that lets you do that, obviously that's a really good space. But you kind of want to balance that, because if the ARB goes and says, Manager X, we just reviewed this design from somebody on your team that is so scary, we don't think you guys know what you're doing.
Yeah.
That is something you also want to avoid.
That is not good.
It's a balancing act of find somebody far enough away, but that knows enough, but is far enough away that it will not leak back that there are gaps in how you thought about something.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think to that extent, having a mentor also helps. I think there's so many times when, even with the videos that I post them and I make them, I enjoy creating them. If I wasn't getting paid, I'll still be creating them.
Yes.
I enjoy coding. Like, it's stuff that I think about all the time. Yeah. And for a while, I never posted them on LinkedIn because I felt like, who are you to be posting these videos on LinkedIn?
Yeah, exactly.
LinkedIn, we get OGs, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are principles on LinkedIn. Like, there are people who are working on way more complex system, and you are here trying to teach them,
HTTP. How does authentication work?
Exactly. You're here trying to create a video about, whatever on LinkedIn when the OGs are here. And I remember talking to my manager at the time about it. And before I even spoke to him, turns out they already knew about the videos, but no one just ever brought it up to me.
Fair.
So I would be on campus and people would walk up to me and be like, "Oh, you're the guy." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no, your videos are really, really good." I'm like, "Oh, thank you." Then at some point in time, I was having one-on-one with one of my old managers, and he was like, "Oh, your video about this was really good." I was like, "Oh, thank you." I didn't know he was watching. And this was even before he was on LinkedIn. This was when he was on just YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. When I was trying to switch teams, the manager that I met to interview me, I met him, I spoke to him. I didn't mention anything about the video. I just told him about the work that I'm doing and the work that I'm interested in doing. And he was like, "Oh, great." Then he put me through an interview loop.
Yep.
I passed the interview.
Yep.
And after I passed, he was like, "Oh, your videos are really, really great. I watch them all the time."
Oh, for real?
He didn't tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So it's like those videos kind of like put me in places before I was there.
Yeah.
Right? And he then encouraged me to say, post them.
Yeah.
As long as you're not saying anything outlandish, as long as you're not, doing anything that'll look bad on you, look bad on the company, post them, right? Yeah. You don't know who you are influencing. And the videos go before you.
That's fair.
People watch the videos, right?
That's
they see your stuff. And it was from him that I was like, "Oh yeah." I never considered myself a content creator. He was the one that was like, you're making the videos, post them, right? Put them there. And if people don't like them, that's fine. Yeah. The same way people may not necessarily like the videos on Instagram or on YouTube. Yep. LinkedIn is no different. If anything, you will inspire more people to do stuff. And that's why I was like, you know what? I'm going to start posting on LinkedIn. And ever since, a lot of opportunities have come from there. I've connected with a lot of great people. But ultimately, having someone who says, "Hey, you're great. Hey, your videos are really, really good."
Yes.
Like having someone who believes in you slightly more than you even believe in yourself, right? Because when you are in the trenches, right, when you're doing the work itself, you're inside it. You can't look from outside and see the stuff that you're doing. Maybe you can, but it's hard to do. But having someone from outside do that is really, really, really helpful. So find a mentor. Find someone who ideally has gone through the same path as you. And that's very, very, very important. I will let you talk about that aspect.
Oh yeah, like I think something to always remember is this. If you're looking for a mentor, you want to find someone that is maybe 2 years or 3 years that did this exact same thing very, very recently. Because if you're finding somebody that will help you navigate a space, the person probably, you want someone that has recently navigated that space as well.
Yeah.
So you're trying to do something, find someone that did it 2 years ago. So you're trying to, like, you are, for example, transitioning to doing some back-end type thing. Find someone that transitioned recently and have the person kind of walk you through. Don't find someone that's been a back-end engineer for 9 years. The person will be like, what do you mean you don't understand, like, doc typing, or like, what do you mean you don't understand, like, this very complex SQL type integration with ORMs? He doesn't get it because he doesn't know, like, he doesn't remember a time when he did not know. So you want to find someone that recently as possible, transition from not knowing to knowing to walk you through. You find you have a much better experience.
I completely agree. I think it's also important to have more than one mentor.
Oh yeah.
Have people in your, similar to how, well, I don't know if everybody does this, but I have friends for different things.
Yeah.
I have friends for basketball. I have friends for running. I have friends for tech. I have friends for if I just want to talk, right? They're like different groups of friends. Similarly, you should have mentors for different spaces, right? Like there's some very, very career-driven mentors, right? There are some very career-driven mentors who will help you to say, okay, hey, I have this goal and I want to achieve this goal in my career by this year.
Yeah.
They will put fire under your nyash, right? They'll be like, these are the things that you need to do. Now, on the technical side, those people may not necessarily give you all perspective or route that you may need to take for specific things. Yes. However, they'll tell you, I think you should go here, I think you should go here, I think you should go here.
Yes.
Now, another set of mentors will give you the route to say, okay, talk to this person, right? Talk to this person, do this way, do this that way. And so have different set of mentors for different things, because ultimately, one of them may be, different groups have different things that they're going to be really good at. Yeah.
Also, on back to the topic of like navigating imposter syndrome, I think something people need to remember is that there is no one archetype or there is no one personality that is the right personality for most things. So you might go to a place, for example, and everybody seems one way. Well, who says that one way is the only way to be this thing, right? You, for example, go to you're in a restaurant, for example, everybody is dressed very prim and proper, and you on the other hand, you have like 12 piercings. I'm like, that is not like, don't think that it's only about like, you have to fit a particular set of stereotypes to be a person in that space. Get comfortable with not meeting stereotypes, but being in that space. And I think like this is one of the things where, like, if you work in a conscious enough environment, you see people that match stereotypes that you have for yourself. You, for example, if you're a goth or like you paint your hair like a different color or something, if you find people like that in your workspace, it makes you a lot more comfortable as well. But never lean into the idea that there is only one way to be that thing. And because you don't look like it, you don't act like this, you're neurodivergent or something, it means you don't belong. I think that thing is always very dangerous when you feel like an imposter.
I also think in that workspace, people are just maybe showing only that aspect of themselves.
Yep.
Right? They like, people are so complicated and so complex, and so there's so many layers. And at work, you may only be seeing this layer of this person, right? And you're now seeing the same layer for these people and these people and these people. But ultimately, they're people too. They're people just like you, right? And just because that's the only part that they're showing, that may not even necessarily mean that's the part of themselves that they enjoy, right? Yes. It may not mean that that's the part of themselves that they really like showing up as, right? Yeah. So it's important to know that, they're people at the end of the day. And ultimately, having a way to connect with them can also help ease some of that feeling of not belonging.
Yes.
Because when you connect with them, when you have conversations with them, you kind of find a way to create connections with them beyond the thing. And then you realize, oh, this person is just a person too, like me. They just maybe have been doing it slightly longer.
Yes.
Or they have other ways that they are using to learn that gives them an advantage over me that I can then tap into.
Yes.
Or, there are just so many aspects of it. But ultimately, if you isolate yourself and kind of like keep everyone away, that's how you start to make scenarios in your head.
Yes.
Say, man, this person, like in your case where you're like, yeah, this guy finished this thing in like 2 weeks.
Yep.
Right? And me, I haven't even finished doing this thing on this thing.
My PyCharm isn't working yet.
Yeah, but your PyCharm isn't working while this guy's already finished this thing.
Yes.
Have a conversation with him and you realize, bro already has a PhD.
Yeah.
how can you you will be setting an unrealistic standard for yourself if you think that is how the reality should be, right? So once you then had a conversation with him, you then understood, oh, it's not that I don't actually belong, right? It's that we just started from different places, and it may take me a little bit longer to get there, and that's completely fine, right? As long as you have evidence that you've done the work before and you are willing to do the work, that's something that's also huge, right? Yeah, go ahead.
So something on a similar note is this: if I don't know if you watch what sports you watch, but for example, like if you watch like American football or you watch like soccer, right, which is football to us Nigerians. Thank you very much. The team isn't comprised only of attackers or of like linebacks. There are defenders. There are different roles. So one thing to also remember is this: you might go to a space and everybody seems to be performing at 100 over 100 on some access. But in reality, there are probably places that they know that there are problems, right? So if you try to compete in the space where they are all at 100 already, you might find that you don't stand out. You feel like an imposter because you are a 20, they are a 100 at that thing. On the other hand, there are probably places where they're not a 100. They don't, for example, have good documentation. They don't, for example, deal with incidents correctly. Or when customers complain, it takes like 2 hours before somebody even looks at it. Or they don't have like good deployment practices. There are always gaps. No team is perfect. The thing is, you might not know how like your team isn't perfect. You might need to ask your manager, like, hey, like, so I see there are these gaps, but like, or like, where are the gaps? But then find something that you can be the person that's the authority on it for. Don't try to compete in, like, if you are playing in a game with like Steph Curry, like, don't be like, I want to also try to be doing that same thing. Like, be like, hey, where can I support this guy?
Get some rebounds,
Exactly.
Set some screens.
Exactly. Or like be the guy that's at the back has blocking like when they're exactly. But don't try to be the person.
Don't try to shoot trees with like his Steph Curry. Like
what are you doing, bro? What are you doing?
Yeah.
So exactly, right? Like, don't feel like you have to compete at that exact game because like there is not only one thing needed to make all the work happen, right? If you're on a team and some people are really good at the actual hard skills, maybe it's a pointer to like build really good soft skills, get really good at presenting, get really good at talking to customers, get really good at debugging things, or get really good at like when a customer asks a question, you like, you know how this thing connects with this thing, connects with this thing.
Find the gaps.
Exactly. But don't try to be like, there is very little value that you could get sometimes in like fighting, but like trying to compete with people that are really good at something. Like, obviously learn from them, but find your niche and then be the person that everybody refers to for that niche. You will find so much value, even if you know, hey, this person codes better than I do. But you know what? Every single time we need to integrate with another customer, I'm the person that goes to the meetings and talks, right? You find your own niche and then you fit right in.
Ultimately, I think when I recently joined Netflix and my mentor told me that exact same thing. You have to be the one that's good at something, right? You have to be the one that's good at either a specific service or known for something. If there's a problem with this thing, they should go to you, right? Find that thing within your team, and that's how you kind of build that rapport. That's how you kind of build your self-confidence as well. One more thing I want to say before we wrap up. Whenever I think, how I personally deal with sometimes when I'm like, how I deal with imposter syndrome is I just look at the evidence. I look at what I've done, right? I look at things that I've built. I look at spaces that I've been in. I look at code that I've written. Like, I just look at the trail of stuff that I've done, and it always hits me. If I've done that, this is just another walk in the park, right? Just have to go back to the ABCs, right? The basics, right? What do I know? What don't I know? How do I bridge the gap?
Yes.
It always boils down to that.
Yep.
What do I know? What don't I know? And how do I bridge the gap?
Yes.
And little by little, it eventually just works itself out.
Exactly.
Right? It eventually just aligns. Everything just aligns, right? And feeling like, oh, man, this guy, no. This guy knows it. You don't know it. Go and ask bros.
Yeah.
Go and ask him, right?
Yep.
Or where can you find the information? There's documentation online. There's videos. Ultimately, you've done it in the past.
Exactly.
You will be able to do it again.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. That's all we have for this episode. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching wherever you are. We will catch you on the next one. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.
Bye.